Governments love to tell you they are safeguarding your financial future. Theory. But if you examine history carefully, a darker reality emerges. Governments have long employed hidden financial schemes to keep everyday people struggling while concentrating wealth and influence at the top. And the most surprising part is that these schemes are far from new. They have been repeated across centuries, disguised under new terms, yet always with the same goal: to shift wealth upward and keep the masses dependent. Let's begin with the oldest and most enduring trick of all: inflation. When a government spends more than it can collect through taxation, it faces a choice. It can be upfront, raising taxes openly, risking political backlash, or it can quietly reduce the value of its currency. Throughout history, rulers have favored the latter. Ancient Rome provides one of the clearest examples. By the 3rd century AD, emperors grappling with the costs of constant military campaigns began diminishing the silver content of the dinar. Coins that once gleamed with near-pure silver were increasingly composed of copper, with only a thin silver coating remaining. The empire claimed nothing had changed, yet the population suffered. Prices rose, savings disappeared, and wages lagged far behind costs. This silent tax disproportionately hurt ordinary citizens, while the state continued to fund its ambitions. Today, central banks perform the same function, manipulating currency in ways less visible, but no less impactful. Moving forward to the Middle Ages, we encounter forced loans, a tactic that combined coercion with patriotism. Monarchs, in England, France, and Spain routinely pressured wealthy merchants and guilds to lend money to the crown. Compliance was mandatory. Refusal carried the threat of fines, confiscation, or even imprisonment. Sometimes, repayment was promised with interest, but it was often delayed, devalued, or never honored at all. Merchants found themselves financing wars and extravagant palaces, while the crown maintained its power with minimal accountability. The illusion of voluntary support cloaked a system designed to extract wealth from the willing and unwilling alike. This pattern persisted for centuries, embedding a principle that would reappear in modern financial systems. By the 17th century, the trick had evolved into formalized finance. When Britain established the Bank of England in 1694, it was not a charitable endeavor. The government required funds for its ongoing conflicts with France. Wealthy investors purchased government bonds, earning guaranteed interest funded by taxes. On the surface, this seemed reasonable, but ordinary citizens bore the financial burden. Duties on everyday items like salt, beer, and cloth were increased to pay the interest. Meanwhile, investors enjoyed safe, predictable returns. The arrangement institutionalized a system of wealth transfer, where labor and consumption financed elite returns. This model, disguised as national finance, set a precedent that continues to govern modern bond markets. The safest investments remain lending to the state, with ordinary taxpayers ultimately footing the bill. Fast forward to contemporary times, and the mechanisms have only grown more sophisticated. Consider deficit spending. Governments regularly accumulate vast debts, issuing bonds to domestic and foreign investors alike. Politicians present this as investment in infrastructure, job creation, or social welfare. Yet a substantial portion is funneled into defense contractors, corporate subsidies, and bailouts. When repayment becomes unavoidable, the state rarely reduces elite benefits. Instead, ordinary citizens face higher taxes, inflation, or cuts to social programs. Bailouts exemplify this dynamic vividly. During the 2008 financial crisis, banks engaged in reckless speculation, packaging high-risk mortgages into securities and destabilizing the global economy. The response? Massive government bailouts funded by taxpayers, yet the beneficiaries were the very institutions rediminished, but larger and more powerful than before. The principle was clear: privatize gains, socialize losses. The public was reassured that this intervention was necessary to protect the system, yet ordinary citizens bore the costs, while the financial elite reaped the rewards. Government-managed pensions illustrate another subtle form of manipulation. Citizens in countries like the United States, Britain, and across Europe have long contributed to these systems with the expectation of secure retirement income. However, governments often do not reserve these funds. Contributions are spent immediately, replaced on balance sheets with promises A, is that future taxpayers will cover obligations when they come due. This is a generational Ponzi-like structure, camouflaged by bureaucratic language. It functions until demographic changes, aging populations, or declining workforces render the system unsustainable. Reforms inevitably follow. Reduced benefits, increased retirement ages, or inflation eroding the value of payouts. The common thread in these examples is perception. Governments shape narratives. Inflation is described as growth, forced loans as patriotism, national debt as investment, bailouts as stability, and pension adjustments as reform. This deliberate framing obscures the reality. Wealth is consistently being transferred from the many to the few. History proves the efficacy of this approach, particularly because most people lack a robust understanding of financial history and systems. The lessons are overlooked until it is too late. In recent decades, these manipulations have grown in subtlety and scope. Take quantitative easing, a concept unfamiliar to the public before the 2008 crisis. Central banks created trillions of dollars, purchasing government bonds and mortgage-backed securities to maintain financial stability. While markets stabilized and asset prices surged, the distribution of benefits was highly unequal. Stocks, real estate, and bonds appreciated, but ownership of these assets is concentrated among the wealthy. Ordinary households saw little advantage, while cost of living pressures increased. The effect was the protection of financial elites at the expense of the general population. Stealth taxation is another modern iteration. Instead of openly raising income taxes, governments impose indirect charges, sales taxes, fuel duties, and, above all, inflation. When prices increase faster than wages, the real value of earnings declines, effectively acting as a hidden tax. Inflation diminishes the real weight of government debt, but simultaneously erodes citizens' purchasing power. A nominal salary increase can mask an actual loss in wealth if costs outpace earnings. This is not a flaw of the system. It is an intentional mechanism to shift the cost of government spending onto the public without explicit acknowledgement. Regulatory capture represents yet another form of manipulation. Regulations, ostensibly designed to protect citizens, often serve the interests of powerful industries. Historical examples abound. 19th century railroads, 20th century oil companies, and today's technology and financial conglomerates. By influencing the regulators meant to oversee them, these entities secure loopholes and maintain dominance. The public perceives protection. Insiders perceive profit. The tactic mirrors an age-old principle. Owning the referee is preferable to competing fairly. War finance illustrates a recurring cycle of exploitation. In both world wars, governments issued vast numbers of bonds, appealing to citizens' sense of duty. The public believed it was supporting national defense, which it was. Yet these bonds simultaneously became lucrative low-risk investments for wealthy individuals, secured by future taxes. In the 21st century, the pattern continues. Massive military engagements, such as in Iraq and Afghanistan, are financed through debt. Defense contractors, banks, and investors profit, while ordinary taxpayers absorb the cost. Wars are framed as temporary emergencies, yet the financial burden extends across generations. Complexity itself is weaponized to obscure wealth transfers. Modern tax codes, financial instruments, and government budgets are intentionally intricate. Thousands of pages of regulations, layered financial products, and concealed line items create an environment where ordinary citizens cannot trace the flow of money. Complexity functions as camouflage. When the public cannot discern the mechanisms of wealth transfer, resistance is effectively neutralized. In ancient Rome, debased coins were visible markers of fiscal manipulation. Today, balance sheets, filled with acronyms and hidden programs, serve the same purpose. The strategy remains: make the process too complicated to follow, and the system extracts wealth with impunity. The stakes today are higher than ever. Inflation erodes savings steadily. Household debt climbs annually. Bailouts remain the default response to market instability. Central banks adjust money supply, while governments shift the cost to the public through indirect measures that many fail to notice. The system is designed to ensure that ordinary citizens work harder for diminishing returns, while the elite consolidate power and wealth. History is a repeated narrative. Roman citizens lost value when coins were debased. Merchants lost fortunes under forced loans, and modern households shoulder debt from inflationary policies. Different eras, same underlying mechanism. Most people will never fully escape these manipulations, largely because they remain unaware of the game being played. Inflation is accepted as inevitable, taxes as unavoidable, and bailouts as benevolent measures. Public messaging substitutes for historical understanding, creating ignorance that becomes the most potent trick of all. Forgetting the lessons of the past leaves one vulnerable to repetition. Governments and elites benefit from a populace uneducated in financial realities. Conversely, financial literacy and comprehension of economic history are forms of resistance. Knowledge equips citizens to recognize recurring schemes and diminishes the power of manipulative policies. So what should you take away? First, always dig beneath the headlines. When governments unveil stimulus packages, ask who truly benefits first. When prices soar, recognize it is not mere misfortune. It is policy in action. When new regulations appear, question who drafted them and who stands to gain. Second, focus on building genuine wealth outside these systems. Assets that retain value even when money itself loses power. Third, never assume the system exists to serve you just because it claims to. Systems are designed to protect themselves, not the individual. History may not repeat exactly, but if you ignore it, it will overwhelm you. The same financial schemes that drained citizens in ancient Rome are still eroding your finances today, only under modern names. The difference is whether you notice them in time